So I was really thinking about what are the seasons of our lives and what are the periods that we have to pay greater attention to? Maybe there's little moments, maybe there's periods of peak performance or growth or stagnation. And what are those seasons telling us? Listen in. So I really wanted to talk about seasons in our life today, what it is that we're going through, and really how we recalibrate our lives. I think sometimes we think that we have to go all in certain areas, or that, if we're struggling a little bit, somehow we're a failure. And so I really want to debunk all of those messages that we tell ourselves and really cut through the crap a little bit today. I want to share a little bit about my past year, the things that I've been experiencing, and hopefully give you a little bit of hope in terms of what this can actually look like for you, what it really means, and how do we apply ourselves in this market, in this economy, in all of the changes that we're seeing, because we are truly going through another revolution, another big change and shift in our history, in our world, in everything that we're experiencing. And so for myself, it's been a season of spiritual recalibration, which also means that it's a recalibration of my business. It's a recalibration of all of my efforts, the products that I'm putting out there, the things that I'm doing, the activities I'm a part of, the relationships that I carry, everything. I feel like it's been this complete overhaul of everything that I was doing in 2024. And I don't know if this is something that you've been experiencing, this shift, not only in the world and how that's impacting you on a personal level or maybe on a career or business level, but also, what does that mean for us? Because I think there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of ambiguity that we're all facing right now. And what does that mean and how we start to approach it? I know it's been a really difficult year for many of us, myself included. We saw big changes happen within our business. I saw big changes happening within the coaching space, within the market. A lot of the contracts that I was working with tanked as a result of some of the changes with the government contracts, things of that nature. And my clients have been experiencing so many shifts in not only their work, but their lives. As you might know, I'm partnered with Goalster. I'm a Goalster Pro, and I help job seekers who are coming in, as well as elite professionals who are wanting to grow in their leadership. And in there, we've been seeing so many highly experienced, highly qualified people who've been on the job market for the past 6 months. And it's devastating. It's devastating to look at someone's resume, to look at someone's LinkedIn, look at all of the accolades, look at all of the things that they have done within their careers, working at Disney, some of them, or Meta, or Airbnb, or Netflix, or whatever that looks like, Microsoft now, and have lost their role, lost their job, and are on the market looking for it. The idea of job security has completely left us. And so I speak a lot about branding. I speak a lot about taking back your power. I speak a lot about how you can make shifts for yourself as a leader, as a business owner, so that you have that insurance policy for yourself. So I talk a lot about that in my business, in my community, in my lives that I go live with every week. But in here on the Hello You show, I want to talk about what that means for us also on a personal level. Because when we go through this, it really impacts our identity. It impacts the way that we lead our lives. It impacts how we show up on a daily basis, how we are as mothers, how we are as spouses, how we are as friends and family members. And so if you've been going through this, I hope that you know, number one, you're not alone. But there is a silver lining, I think, through all of this that we can start to attach ourselves to. And so what does all of this really mean? What does it really require of us to start navigating this space, to start navigating the world, the economy, the market that we're living in, this tech revolution that we're starting to see, and how that's impacting shifts and ripples within the industry? And for me, it really means going deeper. It means going deeper into who I am, into what I'm doing, into myself. It means questioning my activities, questioning who I'm in relationships with, who I'm in partnerships with. I've questioned God. I've questioned advice that I've received. And what I did is I laid it all out in front of me, and I sat down and I looked at it and I thought, things have to start to change. But the way to do this is to bring recalibration. And I feel like this is such an important word for us right now, because it's not only about creating greater alignment, it's about making subtle pivots. It's about recognizing the nuances that we have to be a part of, the nuances in our thought patterns, the nuances in the ways that we go about things, how we spend our time, our energy, our finances. It's all of it. And if we're not subtly doing these little recalibrations, I think I spoke about this in a previous episode, like with a car engine and my son with running, we're going to miss big signals, big things that are coming toward us, because we're not keen on looking on how do we just tweak different pieces of our lives so that we're still moving on the path that we're intended to be. We're still moving toward our calling, toward what's on our hearts, where our lives are intended to be heading. And because fear and uncertainty can really just wreak havoc on our brain, right? The way that our mind works, we will want to go into this kind of cocoon mode. We will want to stay safe, stay sheltered, not make any big changes. And so I think it's important. You don't have to make big, massive changes to start moving towards something, to start moving and shifting. It's like when you're steering a large ship. I imagine, I've never steered a large ship, but if you're steering a cruise ship, you can't just turn the wheel like you can even with a car really fast to avoid something. I think this is what happened with the Titanic, right? You can't just quickly change course. But what you can do is subtly make shifts, and that will subtly start to move you in the direction back on track, back where you are intended to be heading. And so even with all of the things that are taking place in our world right now, it doesn't mean that there isn't any hope. It's not all lost. If you've been actively working on making a transition in your life, maybe you're transitioning from your career into owning your own business. Maybe you're trying to transition from one role or one company into another company. I want you to think about it in this way. Maybe it's about having a little bit of patience. Sometimes we want things faster, we want them sooner, but we also don't know what the work is that's being done in our lives, in our minds, in our hearts. And we have to reposture, we have to reposition ourselves to be back in alignment. And we have to actively be thinking about it. We have to actively be making decisions and choices that keep us on track, because the rest of the world is going to do everything that it can, because it doesn't really care, to take us off track. And that's where distractions can come into play. That's where all of these other pieces. So if we're staring at the news and we're worrying and we're freaking out and we're getting afraid, remember that you have more power and control than you realize. But it's not big, it's subtle, it's small, it's a pivot. And so really consider for yourself, where are some pivots that you could implement, that you can start making little changes to, so that you're not veering off track for too long. So really, recalibration is just becoming more aligned with your calling. And so whatever your spiritual beliefs, I do believe that God has placed a calling on my life, and that we each have a purpose and a calling that we are here to fulfill. And I've studied religious philosophies from Buddha to New Age and anything in between. So I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I believe that is your own path to explore. But what I want to say is that it's never too late. It's never too late to start to recognize what our purpose is, what our calling is, what's been placed on our lives that we are uniquely here to fulfill. Now, that might sound pretty deep if we're going from a conversation about our career trajectories and transitions from corporate into owning a business or corporate from one company to another, but it's all relative and it all plays a part in the path that we are on. And I felt like for a long time, it really was too late for me because of the decisions that I had made and the experiences I'd had and the life that I was leading. So I walked away from my religion and I went and I explored other philosophies on life and existence. And I found my way back to Jesus outside of my church walls. And I still sin. And I'm not here to judge other people. I am definitely not perfect. That's not what I'm here to talk about. And so when I talk about a spiritual calling, a spiritual path, and if I quote certain things from the Bible, it's not because I'm coming from a place of judgment. Pick a number. I have sinned. Even last week on the podcast, I swore, and that was a big deal for me. But the reality is, we all have things in our lives that are not going the way that we hope it will. We're not perfect. This is not about preaching perfection. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And the truth is because life is messy. Life brings us all these variances of challenge and strife and hope and all of the things in between. And the decisions that we make and the actions that we take, it all adds up. And so rather than worrying about how perfect we are, what we really need to do is recognize the gifts of what we bring and the gift that we are to this world. And this is not coming from this egotistical place. It's coming from a place of being a servant. How am I here to serve in a greater way? Not perfectly, but better. I was reading this damning post on LinkedIn the other day, and the author was talking about, and he's someone I highly respect, but he was talking about this lack of authenticity on LinkedIn and how most people are falling flat in their businesses or their branding because they lack authenticity. As you might know, I work with leaders on building iconic brands that help to shape their legacy. And so this topic of authenticity and this topic of branding is very near to me. What I don't appreciate is the level of judgment, the level of shame that we continue to put on each other, trying to make a sale, to impart some wisdom or some knowledge that we're here to teach, or why everyone else is inauthentic except for us. The real truth is that whatever LinkedIn or Facebook or any of these other social media platforms wants to see isn't necessarily what or in alignment with what companies want to see. And so there's this really fine line with authenticity. And I think it's incredibly important that we really understand what the line is that we're walking. Because regardless of what decisions that we make, we have a choice, and that choice is going to determine a trajectory. So if you decide to go all in on being authentic, understanding that there is always, with every decision, there's a counteraction, right? And so what is that's going to look like for us? What I really want to see is where we can actually start embracing one another, where we can stop shaming everyone else, whether they use AI or don't use AI, whether they're authentic or inauthentic. The people who I know in my life who are the closest to what I would consider or perceive to be godlike are anything but holier than thou. And being raised in a church that had very much this holier than thou approach to Christianity, to having a spiritual walk, It's the very reason that I walked away from very much that religious dogma of shaming and judgment, which is the very thing that we're not here to do. We're not here to judge and shame other people. It reminds me of my husband's great aunt. She's, I think, 85 or 86 now. And this woman has been such an inspiration to me in my life. She's the cutest, shortest person I've ever met. And she still shows up to church, walks to church from her house, several blocks, I might add, so that she can pray with other people. She shows up and brings meals to parishioners. She goes to hospitals and prays. She is always in a servant mentality of how she can be of better service. She takes care of the entire family. There are 15 siblings. She's the oldest. Not everyone is still with us. But to me, this is an act of service, is an act of servanthood. If anyone is here to judge, I mean, she would be the closest. And yet, if you were to ask her, she would be the furthest away from that. And I think we can all take a note from that, because walking this path, walking a path of purpose, of calling, of doing something greater, recalibrating our lives, going deeper, it can be really lonely. And it can require a deeper connection with truly who we are. And so, number one, I think it's really important that we understand the difference between what is true authenticity versus what is attention seeking. So when we're looking at these social media platforms and we're thinking about what's truly going to be scroll stopping, what's going to hook people in, what's going to be the brazen thing that we say that's maybe the unpopular opinion, truly ask yourself, are you doing this to be authentic, or are you doing it to be attention seeking, to get more views and more likes? Again, I don't have an issue with either one. I do both because I have a business that I'm trying to run. But if we're going to be judging other people, I think that we first have to look at ourselves, and we have to cut through the BS and the things that we're peddling to ourselves as authentic. So when I talk about authenticity, I think number one, it's really important. Authenticity, this journey of authenticity, is deeply personal. And when I'm talking to leaders about their branding or being authentic in their branding, we're going deep into who they are, because it requires understanding what your core values are, what you stand for, what you don't stand for, and really what boundaries that you start putting in place to help move you forward on that calling, on that path, on that purpose. Because there's a million other things in the world that will pull us away from that. And so we have to be deliberate. But it requires knowing who we are and owning who we are. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. And when we can look at that from our own eyes, from with clarity, where we can see the pieces of ourselves that are very imperfect, but also accept those parts of ourselves at the same time. It doesn't mean that we don't try to improve or that we don't try to get better. But when we try to be perfect, essentially what we end up doing is changing who we are. And I want you to really think about that when it comes back to authenticity. Because if we're trying so hard to be authentic, are we truly being authentic? So when I swore in my last show, it was deeply scary for me. Not because I don't swear, I do, because I am a sinner and I'm definitely not perfect. But I also find that being liberated enough to express myself is also important. And I was also afraid of the judgment or the backlash that I would receive. Sometimes we take risks in our lives because it's important to deliver a message in a way that someone hopefully it cuts through the noise in their own mind. The biggest challenge that we face, the biggest BSers are ourselves. And we will peddle that until we feel justified in the actions that we're taking. We can call it rationale, but really it's just a justification for our actions. And I have plenty of my own. But if we're allowing those things, perfectionism, to hold us back from recalibrating to pivoting, if we're allowing fear to hold us back. And I'm not talking about calculated fear. I'm not talking about, being wise. I'm talking about the state of the world in which we are living today as a place to give up hope. We might as well throw in the towel because there's no point right now. That's what I'm talking about, because we have to recenter ourselves back into what our purpose is, what our calling is, what we're here to do, and be mindful of it. It doesn't necessarily mean the timeline is our timeline. It means that we have to be patient, but we have to be wise. So the more that we can recognize those little pieces within ourselves, those little narratives, those stories that we tell, why we do things, and stop judging other people, but really just turn that focus back into how we can be the best versions of ourselves, whatever that looks like. Again, perfection isn't the best version of ourselves. And I don't think that if walking a spiritual path, that we're really called to be perfect. I think we're called to serve. I think we're called to try to bring hope and to bring light into a world that's full of darkness right now, and things that we can't possibly understand are happening. And yet, what can we do about that? And most of that work starts first with us. It first starts inside before we can take it outside. So as I read his post, I had to think for myself, because there's plenty of times I come across really polished, and that's because I had to learn how to be polished. I had to learn how to have executive presence or gravitas. I had to learn to be more comfortable with speaking and doing things that quite naturally are not comfortable for me. Because the truth is, I'm so introverted in many respects. I can be an ambivert. I'm not afraid of social settings. But when it comes to speaking up, I have to be comfortable, because that introverted side will take over. And in my life, I've used other tools to help me overcome that. I've used drinking or partying or trying to fit in to help me overcome my deep introversion. But the reality is, it's not so much that I'm introverted, because introversion is really just a range of extroversion, right? But what I think is really important is understanding what's going on under the surface. When I took my Principles U personality assessment, I was really surprised to actually find out that my humor was really low. So on a serious level, I'm at like 98%. So under the surface, while I can tell a joke and I can have sarcasm and I can make things light and I can use humor, under the hood, it's always humming on this very serious, very driven, very ambitious calculation that's happening inside of my brain. And sometimes it's hard to turn that off. And most of the conversations that I thrive in, other people don't want to hear. And so I struggle to know how to bridge that gap for myself. And I've had to work really hard at that, which is probably why I moved into coaching, because now I can listen intently and then we can get down to brass tacks, whether it's spiritual, emotional, strategic, and start working on areas of their lives, areas of their business that are going to help propel and move them forward. I thrive in that. And I'm curious, what is under the hood for you? What keeps you moving forward? What's that invisible treadmill that you're running on, that you're operating on, that sometimes we're ignoring because we're so busy trying to be whatever everybody else is expecting of us, whatever we think that they need from us. And we're not really paying attention to who's the person inside of me that's going to help deliver this calling, this purpose. And I think that's what's given to us. And it's given to us in a multitude of ways, and everybody is different. I've gone through over 100 personality assessments with clients, and everyone is different. There might be nuances of similarities between people, but sometimes the humor is super high, and they're ambitious and they're driven, but humor is super high. We all use different aspects of ourselves to be successful. It's when we don't recognize it, we stop paying attention, or we try to fit ourselves into a mold, that we lose ourselves. And so to me, authenticity is about really recognizing that. It's not about how brazen or raw you necessarily have to be, because we have to be smart. We have to be wise. We have to understand our audience. Now, your audience is going to differ depending on where you are and who you're talking to. This show has a different audience than some of my other clients or my other, lives that I do. So we have to tailor the content to hopefully fit our audience and what it is that they want to hear from us, which is why this show goes a lot deeper. It's a lot more spiritual. It's a lot more emotional. It's not the content that I am talking about every day. So I wanted to share a little bit of hope with you and hopefully get you thinking about, what does it really mean for you, for your life? Where is your life? Where is your purpose taking you? And so I have a couple of different scriptures that I just wanted to read because I find them to be helpful and what they mean to me in perspective. And so really the first piece of this is that God gave us all a calling. We have a purpose. We have something that's been placed on our lives. And it's not always about flow. I think sometimes that we confuse a purpose and a calling with something that's going to come easy, as though all of the roadblocks have been cleared for us, when in fact, that's not exactly what it always means. When we're on a path where we're pursuing a calling, a purpose, a business, whatever that looks like for you, it doesn't always mean that, even if it's the right path, that there will be no roadblocks, no hurdles, because in those roadblocks and in those hurdles, we ourselves are growing, we're overcoming, and we're solidifying. We are claiming that this is a path that we're here to take. And I think sometimes we inadvertently think that because that maybe a door closed or there was a boulder in the way, that means that we're not supposed to pursue it. When I also liken it to, maybe we have some growing to do in order for us to understand how to navigate it. So whether that means we have to grow in certain areas of our leadership, in certain areas of fundamentals within business, in certain areas of communication skills, whatever that looks like, sometimes that's the piece that we're having to ready ourselves for so that we can move into that next phase and understand how to maneuver and navigate more eloquently. And so Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." And what I liken this to mean is that not all things that are coming together are necessarily going to be easy. Sometimes being on a path, being on a calling is in concert with growing closer in our spiritual walk, growing closer to that which we are connected with. And it means that we're on a journey that is of self-discovery, it's exploration, it's how we can serve in a greater way. And so it goes further in Romans 8:29 through 30 that essentially God gives us a foretelling, a predestination on our lives. There is this calling, this justification for our walk and a glorification of him. God isn't always here to remove the roadblocks. When we can lean into him, though, he can use us and help us to get through our circumstances, to get through our challenges by leaning into him in a greater way. For me, this last year of recalibration has been just that. I was first leaning in a lot more heavily in Bible study. I was leaning a lot more heavily into journaling, into gratitude, into finding myself. But I also found myself falling back into some old forms of thinking. And there was a lot of judgment that was starting to come up, not necessarily on other people, but for myself. Judgment of not feeling righteous enough, not feeling perfect enough, for swearing too much, for being not the right example. And I think what I had to do is distance myself enough from some of that doctrine, some of the things that I grew up with, the things that were starting to come back and resurface into my life that usually led me feeling with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of confusion, and a lot of feelings of unworthiness. And I think that there's a difference between trying to walk in a spiritual calling, walking in a purpose, walking in faith, and recognizing that there's no way that we're ever going to be perfect. He didn't call us to be perfect. He called us to be a better example. And while we all have room to grow, just as I have room to grow, and every time I get angry, words start coming out that I don't intend to, that's my work. And what is yours? And we each have our own work that we're here to do. But it doesn't negate, it doesn't take away from all of the other work that we're doing. It doesn't take and remove His calling, His purpose, and His love in our lives. And so I didn't really mean for this to sound like preachy in any sort of way, but just to recognize and understand that there is never a point that you are unworthy. And I don't care what it is or where you're at in your life or what it is that you're doing. There's always room where He wants to bring you back into a spiritual path, into a purpose, into a calling that is there to serve a greater good. Which brings me to point number 2, in that it's never too late. It's never too late to follow your calling. God is here pulling you closer to Him so that you can do the work that He has predestined upon your life. And in that process, you will receive new beginnings, a freshness in your life, new paths, new journeys, and experiences that we can't always understand or foretell because we're not there yet. And so my second scripture for you is Isaiah 43:19, which reads, "Behold, I will do a new thing, and now it shall spring forth. Do you not perceive it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." This is God's promise of transformative power in our lives. This is His promise of bringing renewal and transformation in us when we start to claim what that path is for ourselves. We start to claim our purpose. We start to claim that calling in a deeper and more meaningful way for ourselves in our lives. And it's not only that He can bring renewal into our lives, it's that He can help us to get through circumstances that we're facing with a renewed freshness, and that we can have new experiences and new joy and new outcomes. And the third point is that He will give you everything that you need. Sometimes we won't understand what's happening while we're in the middle of it. I know this year has felt really challenging for me. We've had several health issues within our family, several things that took place. We've had broken down cars. We've had so many different things that happened that required us to not only break down, but rebuild and rebuild trust and rebuild faith and rebuild who we were. And I had to rebuild parts of my business because it required a recalibration. It required a new commitment, not only for this path, but to myself and to God and what it is that I'm here to do. And sometimes when we see everything kind of crumbling around us, we start to question, is He even in our court? Is He even there? Does He even exist? Does He even love us? Or is all of this just BS? I know I've been there in my life, and I just want to call that out. I think that sometimes when our faith is tested and we're experiencing these different things, what we have to recognize is what is on the other side of it. And more often than not, every time I go from a period where I've had to, things are torn down and I have to rebuild, it's because I was missing a piece or something shifted. And in that journey and in that process, I rediscovered myself in a new way, in a way that I could see myself differently. And I brought greater alignment into my message, my purpose, my business, my calling, the actions and the energy that I put forth into it. And so I always like these idea of it's like the phoenix rising. I love this analogy of having to rise up from the ashes. And I have felt that way many times in my life, as you know, overcoming abuse, overcoming sickness and in health. And right now, I have several people, even from high school, who are struggling with health concerns. I have 3 people I know who are on hospice right now. We don't always have the answers for what's happening in our lives or why. And I certainly am not going to try to explain why certain things are happening in other people's lives. All I can say is that when I was going through some real challenges with my health, there were many times I questioned why. Why was this happening? Why was this taking place? What did I do to cause this? And so in Jeremiah 30:17, he talks about restoration. I will restore health to you, and I will heal you of your wounds, says the Lord, because they called you an outcast, saying, it is Zion, for whom no one cares. And really what this means is that God is promising to heal and to restore you, regardless if you have felt rejected or forgotten. I know many times in my life I have felt either rejected or forgotten. I have felt unworthy. I have felt lost. And all of this to say is anytime that we feel these things, it's because we're human. And because that which has been placed upon us is greater of a burden sometimes than we can carry. And we can't carry it all alone. And so for me, this last year of recalibration has really been not only a renewal, but an undoing. It's been really thinking about what is in my life that brings value, that adds value, and what in my life isn't serving a purpose any longer. And I know that recently, even in conversations that I've had, I've really had to question, what has the purpose of this conversation led to? And has it led to the things that matter most? Whatever it is that you feel called to in your life, I want you to consider what matters most. What matters most in your energy? What matters most in what it is that you're doing? Are you fulfilling the promise that's been placed upon your life? Are you fulfilling that purpose, that calling that's been placed upon your heart? What areas of your life require a calibration, require some adjustment, some pivoting? What areas require a rebuilding, a sense of renewal? What areas of your life require you to take greater analysis and see where the alignment needs to be so that you are continuing down the path that you have been called to? It's the seasons of our lives that make a difference in how we show up, what matters most to us, where we pour ourselves into further, and what doors and opportunities start to open because we did that work, because we stepped back and maybe took the time necessary to reanalyze, to re-look with greater clarity into what it is that we're here to do, what it is that we are led to do. And not everything has to feel high and mighty and lofty. Believe me, when we're in the trenches, none of it feels that way. Sometimes it just feels like work. Sometimes it does just feel like I'm redoing this for the 15th, 100th time. I'm pivoting and I'm going to show up differently today. How can I help create greater alignment or clarity with team members or with organizations or with different leaders or whatever that looks like? Sometimes it is having the patience to deal with our teenage kids or our spouse or family members. Sometimes it's just taking that step back to breathe. Sometimes it's looking at the advice that we've received from well-meaning, highly regarded authorities in our industry and asking ourselves, is that advice meant for me? Recognize in your life what's meant for you, so that you have the clarity, you have the discernment on what to bring in and what to set a boundary around, what to say no to, what to recognize might be right. It might be right in all other circumstances, but it may not be right for you. And the more attuned that we can be with that in our lives, the more attuned that we can be with what is inside of us, because there's things in there that you have unique to you that no one else knows about, no one else has done. And it may not even have worked for them because it was not intended for them. It was intended for you. And so I really want you to consider that for yourself as you go throughout this week, as you're thinking about what season are you in, what requires recalibration, what requires greater alignment for you. And if you're looking for a place where you can come and find greater alignment, come create greater connections with other people, come and rest in growth, in learning, in recalibration, in refinement of whatever it is that you're creating, whether it's in your leadership, whether it's in a business, whether it's in a transformation or a transition, then I do want to invite you to come check us out at the Powerhouse Legacy Collective. This community is about bringing together those who want to continually not only grow, but refine themselves into whatever that next level looks like. So I'd love to extend that invitation to you. I don't get nearly as preachy in there as I have been today, but it was on my heart to share this with you today and really connect back with who we are and what it is that we feel is important to be spending time in our lives. And sometimes we can allow all the rest of the world to cloud our judgment, to cloud our beliefs, to cloud our hope, our resilience, and our restoration. And even though there's all of this happening, this tumultuous moment in history, we alone have the ability to understand how we respond. It's like that famous quote that often is attributed to Viktor Frankl, but really wasn't from Viktor Frankl, which is between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose our response. But here's another quote that is really from him. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And I do believe in the crux of all of this is the choice that we have to start pursuing what we feel has been put upon our lives, what we feel is right for us, what we feel we are here and meant to be doing. Whether anyone else understands is irrelevant. It's what we feel is right for us. And so I ask you, what season are you in right now? I'd love to invite you to the Powerhouse Legacy Collective. Come join us on the inside. The link is in the notes. And I hope that you can really walk forward in this week, recognizing where are you at right now and where is it leading you? Thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to have some amazing guests coming on, and I know that they're going to be powerful and moving in your life as well. We'll see you then. Thank you for tuning into the Hello You Show. It's been a pleasure to have you with us on this journey today. If you found value in our conversation and want to support the show, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also deeply appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also enables others seeking inspiration and authenticity to discover our community. Until next time, keep embracing your story with purpose.